Good morning. Denise Dryden here doing my weekly educational videos. And what I've noticed is that over the last 5 years, I continue to bring these videos with little tips and services on what to be aware of, what are some of the nuances going on, what's happening in our relationships. And I'm so glad that you're here watching them. And what I want to do is add an additional piece, which is called Tuesday's Tools, which is a way to meet with me in a small group of 4 on a Zoom educational call, 75 minutes on Tuesdays. So go to the links underneath this post and look at the time that's available, and I will be adding some more times as I do a poll to find out what's the most convenient for each of you to, or for a small group to come and do classes. So for right now, I want to talk about, what happens when we're deficient in our discernment. And that came up in a couple of talks. I follow a lot of YouTube videos, and I'm constantly educating on what's going on right now. What can we do? And what I noticed is that, to be deficient in our discernment means that there's things that we miss sometimes, whether it's a little like tap, tap, tap on the shoulder or a red flag that goes by 2 or 3 times. And what we know about energy is that when we ignore it, it gets bigger. When we know about anything, that when we ignore it, it gets better. So it goes from the subtle to the louder, right? So part of what I do is I want to make sure we have a very concise definition of the words that we're using. And I have a blast. Every Sunday morning, I get my iPhone out and I start, searching for definitions. And so the definition of discernment, this is fun, I wrote it really small and my eyes aren't working this morning, is exhibiting keen insight. Keen insight, not just insight, but like super powerful insight, right? And good judgment. It's the ability to obtain sharp perception, to judge well. And last week we talked about what happens when our observations and our judgment get, sticky and intertwined, right? But to judge well. It's the quality of being able to grasp the obscure, like totally obscure ideas, right? And it's when when we're perceiving something and we make very careful distinctions, like, yeah, that goes there and that goes there, and I'm not going to worry about this until tomorrow because I don't have to, right? So when we make a distinction of what's important. So when we discern something, we're perceptive, we're acute, we're shrewd. We have sharp-sightedness. We pick things up, right? When we discern, when we have a discerning intelligence, we pick up a lot of details. So what we see and understand in people and things and situations is clear, and it's intelligently gathered. So that's what happens when we are discerning, when we have discernment. And I wanted to talk about today was what happens when that discernment sort of flips over, right? So it's the application of how we gather. It's the way we use our intellect to apply the knowledge we are gathering, right? So what happens is when we gather information and we start to build an internal knowledge, our frequency goes up. So when we're building information that's about us, about what we know ourselves to be, how we perceive the world, our frequency goes higher. It's an interesting statement, isn't it? Our frequency goes higher when we have stronger self-knowledge, when we go internal. When we are deficit in this, it's when we're lacking some essential qualities. It's when we're wanting, we have an inadequacy of being able to gather information. It's insufficient, it's not complete. And I know that this is very natural. This happens all the time. There's no judgment. It's just like, oh man, that part of me is not gathering information the way that I know that I can. And because I'm such a gatherer of information, I can tell when I'm deficit and when I'm not. So, what causes this? What causes those deficiencies to come in? And so, what we know is when we get too busy, when we're stressful, when there's too many things in our plate. So what I like to do with my clients is I sort of gather everything off my desk and try to hold it. And I go, so you want me to listen to you right now and you want me to pay attention? Because I'm concentrating on how to hold all of these things. So the busier we get, the more stressful we get, the harder it is to be able to gather information, right? So when there's also refusal, attachment, Sometimes there's this magical thinking like, la, 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 la. If I just close my eyes, it will go away. I don't want to see it. And then we stall. And we stall or we get overwhelmed. So these are reasons why the deficiency happens. So what we know is that our self-knowledge is a tool. Our discernment is a tool. So when we can capture something and listen and identify to those like little subtle shifts that happen around us, those little nuances, then we know that we are getting underneath the surface and we're starting to pay attention. So, where I usually do is I'll go like, what was that? Did I just see that? Did I just hear that? Did I just feel that? Did I just experience that? So what I do first is acknowledge, wait a minute, something just subtly shifted. There's a little ripple. What was that? And so when we learn to pay attention to those little subtleties, we ask ourselves, did I just? Is that what's happening here? Right? And then what I've learned to do is to double check. Like, did I just see that? And so I'm checking in with my inner self, not checking out in the external to say, hey, did you guys see that? Because we don't know who sees it or what they do. Sometimes they do, but most of the time when we're checking on the external, we're giving our self-knowledge away, right? So ways to do the internal test is to double check, which is to muscle test or to do yes or no's, and to solidify the information, because when we solidify the information, we embody it. We bring it into form inside of ourselves. Yep. Okay. So now I just felt that. So when we're gathering these insights and this information, and, they turn into these wisdoms, right? They turn into knowledge that we have about ourselves, about what we need, about what we are seeing, about what we can do. So our discernment goes up, and which is where our wisdom resides. So when we're deficient, it's because there's distractions. There's old patterns at play. So part of what we're going to do is we're going to look at these tools, right? But when we are gathering, and we're off, we're blocked, and we're missing things, we know that they get bigger, they get messier, they get harder to handle. So I'll give you an example. I have worked for the last 25 years with parents who have adolescents and young adults, and now, 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds who are, struggling with maybe academics, not keeping pace with the class, or having some challenges, struggling with overwhelm and anxiety, struggling with, especially in the teen and young adult, substance abuse, addiction, school refusal, video screen addiction. And so, what we know is that when we ignore something like that and we don't pay attention to it, it gets bigger. So those are the examples I would use. When our discernment is deficient, we miss the subtle cues that helps us redirect ourselves and our family and the people we love and we care for and we steward, especially our children, right? So when our discerning skills are active and partnered with our body, we're responsive and we're compassionate and we're prepared and we're wise, right? We shift from deficient and lacking into sufficiency and nurturing, and into mastery, right? So what we want to do is we want to build these discernment skills up. So I have 6 tools for you, and then we're going to play with these tools on Tuesday's tools if you want to take a class on this and dig into this a little bit more, right? Because what we want to do is we want to build that inner wisdom. So the first is that we want to find or create a way to slow down the pace around you. You have to. You have to sort of sequester 15 minutes, a half an hour, 1 or 2 times a day so that you can breathe slower, so that you can put the things down around you and go, now that I'm not in survival mode, what are some of the nuances around me that I am starting to notice? We have to be able to do this. If we can't do this, then how do we expect any of this discernment, these discernment pieces to be able to be seen and heard without getting louder? Right? So number 2, be gentle with the swirling and the overwhelm that needs to settle. Just because you decide for the very first time to set aside 15 minutes and just sit quietly and allow information to come in doesn't mean that your body knows how to do that. So we have to be really gentle with it. It's not going to happen immediately. You have to train your body so that it can trust you and expand with you. Like, okay, so now you're really going to let me. Oh, you're going to let me listen now. This is really good. And are you going to pay attention when I listen? I'm house sitting a cat, and the two of us are still building trust. And I laugh. This is where I kind of came up with this discernment, like, oh, okay, so now we're going to do this. Okay. And to be really gentle and realize it's going to take some time to trust and expand, right? Number 3, acknowledge the pieces that have energy that catch your attention. Because I always follow Alan Seal's words, follow the energy. When the energy shows up, you're like, oh, there it is. Tap, tap, tap. There it is. There it is. So it's the loud ones. It's the repetitive tapping on your shoulder. And when you sort of face them and go, okay, I'm paying attention now. Show me what I need to know, right? So you acknowledge the process, and you pay attention to what catches your attention. Number 4 is you confirm, using your body as a pendulum, using muscle testing, using yes or no's. So, going like, did my inner self begin to understand what's going on out there? So you confirm, yeah, did I just see that? Did I just feel that? Is this what you want me to pay attention to, right? Number 5, flesh it out. Build a perspective. If this is tapping me on the shoulder, trying to get my attention, then is this about my son? Is this about my health? Is this about something financial? So you start to sort of flesh it out, like, why? Why is this trying to get my attention right now? Do I need to focus on this? And so I use terms like, it is in my highest interest to look into my finances. It is in my highest interest to sort of check in with my daughter, one of my daughters. Is it in my highest interest to sort of like pay attention to something that's been nagging me with my health, right? So what I do is I flush it out and I develop it a little bit more. And number 6 is that, I build trust in my inner perceiver. I have to build trust, which is, this isn't a once and done thing. This isn't where you go, okay, gotcha. Now from now on, we're simpatico. We are in alignment. It's like, no, like any good relationship, it needs to be nurtured out. It needs to be held as important. It has to be held as visible, because you have to show to yourself that you're the wise one, right? So what we've been able to do in this video today is look at where we miss details because we're deficient, because we're not paying attention. And when we do pay attention and our discernment goes up, our wisdom expands and we pick up a lot more information and a lot more details. So next week, what I want to do is take it from, we have this observer and we have these strings out here that we've been talking about the last 2 weeks, right? And now we're talking about discernment, which is now I have a little bit more clarity of what's going on. And next week I want to talk about how do you communicate with other people when you see something that they don't want to see, or you are being super intuitive and observant and you're noticing something. So next week we're going to talk about communications. If you want to sign up for my class on Tuesday, it's in the link below. You can always find me on DeniseDryden.com, and I'm on YouTube, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm all over the place. So wherever you are finding me, thank you. Click, subscribe, follow me. Let's build this up and get this going, okay? I'm excited. This is taking video presentations and teaching classes on it, which is something that I find myself getting more excited for the first Tuesday to come. Look forward to seeing you next week on Sunday. Take care. Bye-bye.